Hi, I'm Jeremy, the Zoo Nerd, coming to you live from my backyard in beautiful Los Angeles, California. How's everyone doing today? I hope you're well, happy, healthy, and having some fun. Today is World Goat Day, so we're going to talk a bit about goats, both wild and the domestic friends that so many of us know. If you saw the photos I posted earlier on Facebook and Instagram, those are several different species in the goat genus. The goat genus is called Capra, and there are 9 species plus the domesticated goats. So we'll talk a little bit about each of them. First, domestic goats are a domesticated subspecies of a species of wild goat that is called the wild goat. Real creative naming there. The wild goat is still around, which is a little unusual for domesticated species. Usually when a species becomes domesticated, the wild ones kind of fade out. But with goats, we still have the wild version of the newly domesticated animal. Domestic goats were domesticated around Iran approximately 10,000 years ago, which makes them one of the oldest domesticated species. They were domesticated for their hair or their skins, their meat, and their milk, which are all still very important on a global basis today. Here in the United States, not as much. People do keep them as pets, and goat milk is somewhat popular, and goat cheese is, of course, popular as well. The wild species of wild goat comes from Western Asia and the Middle East, places like Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and Pakistan, where it still exists in good numbers today. In addition to that, and the wild goat scientific name is called Capra aegagrus. I don't know Latin very well, or Greek, whichever word that is. In addition to the wild goats and domestic goats, there are a total of 9 species of goats. So wild goats is one of those. 5 of the others are all different types of ibex. Ibex are goat species with very long curved back horns. If you saw the photos I posted on Facebook and Instagram, the first photo are male ibex of the Nubian ibex species. That photo was taken at the San Diego Zoo about a year ago. And they are very cool looking animals with huge horns. All 5 ibex species have horns similar to that, but their body types vary a bit based on where they live. Ibex generally live in Europe, a little bit into Asia, and a bit into Africa and the Middle East. So the 5 species of ibex, the first ones are the Iberian ibex. Those live mostly in Spain, with a bit into Portugal and a tiny bit just into the French and Spanish border. They are listed as least concern, which is very good. They've actually done fairly well in modern times, which is kind of rare for animals that live in a country that has a lot of people, like Spain does. Next is the Alpine ibex. This one also lives in Europe, in Italy, Austria, France, Germany, and Switzerland. So in the countries that occupy the Alp mountains. And they are also listed as least concern because the Alps are fairly well protected, and the wild ibex that live there are also fairly protected. The third species of ibex is the rarest of all ibex, called the Walia ibex. They only live in one country, in Ethiopia, and they only live in one place in that country. They live in the Simien Mountains National Park, where it's believed that there's about 500 to 600 of the species left. So they are listed as vulnerable to extinction, and there is very little known about this species, although there are efforts to try to learn more about them. Ethiopia is a country with a huge human population that has undergone a lot of struggles in modern times, and that always negatively impacts the wildlife. Luckily, they do exist in a national park and they are protected there, so that does help but they still face many struggles, including competition from livestock that graze in their same area. Similar to the Walia ibex that lives in Ethiopia is the Nubian ibex. That's the one that was featured in the photo earlier today. Nubian ibex live across portions of the Middle East and Africa in countries like Egypt, Israel, Jordan, Oman, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, and Yemen. They are also listed as vulnerable. They live in very hot, dry, deserty climates, and poaching is a huge issue for them. Ibex are sought mostly as a trophy type animal because of those huge curved horns that they have. Those horns can be up to 48 inches or 4 feet in length from where they attach at the skull all the way back to the tip. Huge horns, really impressive to see them, huge male with those horns. And finally, our fifth ibex species is the Siberian ibex. And as you may guess, this animal lives in a little colder climate and also in a Russian area, although most of its range is actually in other countries like Afghanistan, China, India, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Mongolia, Pakistan, Russia, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. Those are all, or mostly, countries of the former Soviet Union. And so some of those countries are somewhat unfamiliar to most of us, but it's kind of in that Central Asia area. And these Siberian ibex tend to be a little more stocky as they live in some colder mountainous areas. They are listed as near threatened, with hunting and poaching being their biggest threat. Moving on to another species of wild goat called the markhor. Markhor were also featured in the photo I posted earlier today. The little baby that's walking by itself is a baby markhor. The males of that animal also have very long horns that spiral up. Huge horns that can be up to 5 feet in length. So they are also sometimes hunted for their horns. Markhor live kind of again in those Central Asian countries, places like Afghanistan, India, Pakistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. They also face competition from livestock and hunting, and many of those countries where they have lived have had wars in recent years, and whenever there's human wars going on, animals in those areas tend to suffer quite a bit. They are listed as near threatened. They are also the biggest species of goats in the world, with them weighing between 170 up to 250 pounds. And they stand between 26 and 45 inches at the shoulder, with males being significantly larger than the females. They are also the national mammal of the country of Pakistan, so they are a very important animal and protected in some parts of their range, though not all of the areas. Our last two species of goats are the turs. There is an eastern tur and a western tur. They live in the Caucasus Mountains, which are mountains that run between the country of Georgia and the country of Russia. They also overlap a little bit with the country of Azerbaijan, if you've ever heard of that. So again, this is kind of in Western Asia. And these animals are, the eastern tur is listed as near threatened. Poaching and competition from livestock are their biggest threats. And the western tur is actually listed as endangered. It is protected in the country of Georgia and somewhat protected in the country of Russia, although not as well. With all of these species of wild goats, they are typically living in mountainous areas, places with steep rocky cliffs and hillsides. Sometimes in the forest, particularly the turs live in forested areas, especially during the winter time when they are dealing with a lot of snow in those areas. Goats are known for being very agile climbers, climbing up and down the Rocky Mountains, and also some of them are very good at climbing into trees. If you've ever seen domesticated goats do this, you'll know what I'm talking about. I've seen domestic goats in trees in many places where I have visited and seen goats wandering about. Goats are also able to eat a wide variety of things, including grass and bushes or browse. So they'll eat the leaves off of trees, bushes, flowers, fruits, nuts, seeds, the bark off of trees. So they're usually able to tolerate a wide variety of food sources, which has made them very successful in general on a global scale. They are ruminants, similar to cows and sheep. So they chew their food, it goes into their first stomach, it gets partially digested, and then they kind of cough it back up and chew it again. This is sometimes called chewing their cud. That helps them to break down the tough fibers in a lot of these plants. And then they swallow it again, it gets digested further, and then continues through their other chambers of stomachs. They have 4 chambers total of stomachs. That helps them to be efficient at getting the nutrients that they can from their plants. Both males and females of all these species have horns. The males are usually bigger, the male's horns are usually bigger. Most goats also have a beard, so they have a lot of hair on their chin, although not all species do, and particularly not all the domestic breeds do. They also have a very cool thing on their hooves. They usually have 4 toes on each foot, and they kind of use only their 2 middle toes, number 2 and number 3, and then their little toes are kind of off to the sides a little bit. But their hooves have kind of a soft center and kind of a hard ridge around the outer part. That helps them to really grip rocks very well, and it's known that goats are very good at climbing on the mountains and the steep hillsides, usually being able to stand on very small ledges and move about very quickly. With most species of goats, they usually have 1 baby. Some species tend to have more, 2 babies, and occasionally 3 babies is somewhat happens with domesticated species. Goats like the markhor typically do have twins. Several of the ibex species do have twins. The turs usually only have 1 baby. Gestation for most species of goats is between 5 and 6 months. The babies, when they're born, are able to climb and jump within a day of being born. And baby goats are some of the cutest baby animals out there. One thing that I find very fascinating about goats is that their eye, specifically their pupil, the dark part in the center of their eye, is different shaped than most animals. It's kind of a narrow slit, or if their eyes open wider, it looks like a rectangle. This helps to give them a broad field of vision and helps them to be able to see their periphery very well as they watch out for predators. Depending on the species, they have a lot of different predators. Usually things like big cats, so things like snow leopards or other leopards. In some places lynx, in some places wolves. And then they also have to watch out when they're babies for smaller dog-like species, things like jackals, in places hyenas, and also birds of prey. Things like eagles will sometimes chase the herd to get the babies to fall, or sometimes snatch the babies when they're real little. One thing I would like to talk about is some conservation work that has been done with goats, specifically with the Nubian ibex. There was a very big herd at the San Diego Safari Park here in California, and in 1989 they made an agreement and a partnership with the country of Jordan in the Middle East. That is one of the home range countries of the Nubian ibex, and their population in Jordan was very low and struggling a lot. So the San Diego Safari Park decided to give to the country of Jordan 22 of these animals that they had been raising at the safari park. They held them in a captive breeding program in Jordan for a couple of years, and that 22 grew up to over 100, and they were then able to release over 30 of those animals back out into the wild of Jordan. So that's some important conservation efforts that have been going on with zoos and these species. As always, I like to talk a little bit about my experience with the animals I feature on Critter Chat. And I have worked with several different goat species during my zoo career. Specifically at the Phoenix Zoo, when I worked there, I worked a bit with the domestic goats. I would often get assigned to help out in the petting zoo there, and I also had a moment of that at the LA Zoo, helping take care of the domesticated goats. In addition to that, I did help during my training time as a zookeeper, taking care of some of the wild goat species, specifically Nubian ibex and the markhor at the LA Zoo, both of which were really cool to work with, and you had to be a little bit careful around the males, but it was super cute to see the babies that were born there. I didn't work with either of those species very much. It was again during my training time to be a zookeeper, and once I became a zookeeper, they were no longer part of the section I worked in, so I didn't work with them much beyond that. As always, I'll be posting some more information about goats on the Facebook profile later today, so check that out. And as always, the full episode of Critter Chat is uploaded daily to Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and onto my website at jeremythezoonerd.com. So feel free to check out any of the past episodes as well, including number 52, which was about bighorn sheep, which are sometimes confused as goats. Now, you may also be thinking, why didn't he talk about mountain goats that live here in the US? They are not true goats. So I will talk about mountain goats another time when I focus on animals that are called the antelope goats, or the goat antelopes, which are neither really goats nor antelopes, but I'll talk about them on another day. I hope you've had fun, and I hope you're having a good day, and that you stay happy, stay safe. We'll talk to you later. Bye.